Hello, this is Ryan Lester of Bold360 and LogMeIn. Excited to be here. We're at VentureBeat Transform, great event. We're on day one, and I'm spending some time with PD Singh. PD, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thanks.
So we're going to spend a couple minutes together talking a little bit about some of the work that PD's doing at UiPath and talk about some hot topics in the AI space. So to start off, why don't you do a little introduction of your role and the work you're doing at UiPath?
Sure. No, I'm really glad to be here. This has been an amazing conference. All the speakers that we had and the people I interacted with, it's been a great experience so far. So my name is PD Singh. I am leading all things AI in UiPath. What that entails is we are infusing drastically new AI capabilities straight into our RPA platform. And so I'm leading all those efforts so we can go into deeper details of all the things that we are working on as far as strategic initiatives in the AI area is concerned. But essentially what we are looking at is how do we take RPA to the next level where the large customers can easily scale their RPA engagements and can seamlessly bring in AI and machine learning components into their automations.
That's great. And maybe get the mic a little bit closer to your mouth when you talk, just so that they can hear you. Is that fine? Okay, great. So you are in two of the hottest spaces around, the RPA space and the AI space. And I've given you a little bit of a hard time. I had to beat back your fan club and groupies as you walked in the room.
Sure.
So it certainly is a very interesting space in that there's a lot of interest in automation through RPA and a lot of interest in AI. So I guess from your perspective, talk a little bit about kind of what that means from an interest perspective, a work perspective, and talk a little bit more about kind of that convergence of these two technologies.
Yeah. If you look at the way RPA started, like if, for example, you were a software developer who knew nothing about machine learning and AI and you wanted to automate something, RPA was the place to start. And so you would use some tools like what UiPath has and start building some basic robots. The joke that I make for people who don't know anything about RPA at all is I'm like, the last time when you saw that CAPTCHA which said, I'm not a robot, those robots are ours.
That's great.
And so having said that, you start off like with very simple use cases. So you would start off with things just to fill up a spreadsheet or just to click a bunch of buttons on different applications in order to automate them. But suddenly you realize, I can actually do much more and I should actually do much more. So when you start thinking of that is when you start needing machine learning and AI use cases. The classic example that I give is, let's say you're a marketer, a small business marketer who's getting a bunch of marketing lists from some provider. You get like 500 email addresses, and now you're seeing at those addresses and you're like, these are not all the people that I want to target. So let's say you have an email address there called motorcyclejunkie@gmail.com. It's like, that's not a person you would want to target. You would want to target people like, Jim at google.com or Sam at microsoft.com. And so that's when you would need these gating functions or AI components which can go in and let you do just things which automation alone cannot do. So you would use automation to pick up these email addresses, plug them into Outlook, send an outbound email. But now if you need a component which is much more smarter than just looking at email addresses, and it can say, oh, this is not the right email address, so let's hold off on that one and target only specific things, is where it becomes really interesting. So this interplay of bringing in cognitive components into a basic logistics system, which RPA is, makes it a really powerful offering.
Yeah, and I like examples. So I did a lot of work also in the past around operations and lean manufacturing and operational excellence. And I think there's really good parallels between what happened in the factory, where it's like, all right, you first automated things, very simple tasks of put a rivet here or weld these pieces together. But then that automation was more and more complex, and it starts to need things like vision systems and other systems to augment the work being done. One, to make sure that's the right piece, it's in the right configuration, it's properly oriented. But then two, the work becomes more complicated, so you need more feedback loops.
Yes. I remember I was working with a beverage company, one of the largest in the US, and exactly as you said, they had completely automated their factory, so they knew the whole bottling process was completely automated, and they needed like 1 or 2 people in that factory, which was like 5,000 square foot area. The biggest problem, so when they came to us and started talking about what their biggest use cases was, there was like, they said they want to predict when a bottle is going to break, because when the bottle breaks on the line, they have to stop the whole line and reset it. And so it was an interesting problem because they had sensors, vision sensors, and everything, which was looking at running the line, the bottling line smoothly. But it was that specific component, the predictive component that they needed, where we needed to bring in the AI and machine learning parts.
Yeah, that's great. Really good example. So another thing I get excited about at conferences like this is that it's a cross-disciplinary AI. It's some very technical aspects, some business, and one thing that's really interesting is when you come to an event like this is that there's a lot of conversation around natural language processing, so the language part of AI. There's a lot of conversation around vision, and then also voice. And I know this is something you have a lot of passion around RPA. Is that for RPA, it's not just about the Excel field, but that there's multiple aspects of RPA across language, vision, and voice.
Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about how that's influencing where RPA is going?
Yeah, there is, if you look at the convergence of technologies, it's really interesting. RPA traditionally didn't use all these interesting and more advanced technologies. So one of the things that we are doing heavily at UiPath is we are bringing state-of-the-art computer vision technologies in our drivers itself. So traditionally, how RPA used to work is you would detect the different components on the applications, and it was a normal software development driver that you would build. But now we are going to the point where we are like, let's have a system which can watch the screen of the users and automatically try to infer what is going on the screen. And so that's where we are bringing like the state-of-the-art computer vision stuff that's being used in the autonomous driving cars. We are actually applying it in the RPA setting, and the results are pretty amazing. So some of the examples are, let's say there's a Windows update that comes in, and now there's a pop-up dialog box that says, "Oh, update or not, or do it later." Your robots are going to choke because they've never seen that dialog box before. Yes. But if you use computer vision, it's intelligent enough to understand this is a modal box and it has two buttons, OK and cancel. If you press cancel, you're OK. You can go back to doing the task. Yeah, exactly. And so we are seeing the convergence of that stuff. And so similarly, once you start deploying thousands and thousands of these robots in enterprises, well, they are going to interact with employees, and you can't expect employees to interact with these robots in traditional ways. So you need natural language interfaces to get the data into these robots. So that's why the voice processing, understanding the voice, NLP stuff becomes much more important. We are seeing a lot of automation happening in chat channels. There's a customer query that comes in. The robot needs to be intelligent enough to understand where to even route a specific query, which department in the company needs to look at that.
What's the appropriate intent?
Yeah. Yep. And so we are seeing a convergence of all these things. So I love all the research that is going on in the academic circles, but bringing that research over into specific use cases that are very relevant for business and high ROI use cases, I think is going to be critical in this area.
Yeah, I agree. Those are really good examples as well. Thanks. And there's a lot of exciting things obviously going on at UiPath, and you've touched on some of those. I think you guys made a big announcement earlier this year at a Google event talking about some of your more platform approach to AI. So we can talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So if you look at the traditional RPA vendors, the RPA as an industry hasn't holistically thought about what would the RPA plus AI ideal platform look like. And so when we got thinking on those lines, we have an interesting mix of people in the company. We have people who have been AI practitioners for a long time. We have people who worked in enterprise applications for a long time. And we said, what would the ideal platform look like? What would be the unique contribution of UiPath, of an RPA plus AI seamless system to the customers is when we thought of AI Fabric. And the whole value proposition there is, you will be able to do something what we call BYOM, bring your own model. So if you have a data science team right now, I remember when I was doing AI in all the previous jobs in the companies, the biggest pain the data scientists had was integrating their models into the end user applications, right? If we can remove that last mile friction that the data scientists have, and you can easily do that using RPA, it's just a matter of, invoking the model, taking the inputs and putting them in an LOB system. If you can do that seamlessly, like within 30 seconds with a drag and drop system, Wouldn't that be amazing? And so that was the central premise of building AI Fabric, where we will let people do that. But also the other gap that we saw in the market was, and you know that, we've essentially, with tools like UiPath and RPA, we've lowered the barrier to entry for a tool set to be able to do integration across different enterprise applications. And so we want to lower the barrier to entry for including AI in automation workflows also. And so that's where AI Fabric shines. You basically take an AI model, you drop it into the AI Fabric. We will do all of what we call AI Ops or ML Ops for you. So we'll version the model, we will monitor it, we will make sure that it's retrained properly, it's being monitored, and is getting the results that you intended the model to get you. So those are the two main things that are driving the AI Fabric forward. But as you can imagine, at some point in future, we will have capabilities where users will be automatically able to just drop a bunch of data. Mm-hmm. So imagine having AutoML-like capabilities in RPA Studio itself, in the UiPath Studio, where users can just go in, put in an Excel spreadsheet and say, I want to predict this specific column. And then once it is predicted, run the downstream RPA workflow. So we will have those capabilities coming into AI Fabric, but the first version, we are starting with just the model management part and the ability to include those models in a workflow.
Yeah, that's great. And the thing I get most excited about is the fact that you're making AI much more approachable and extensible. Yep. And to your point, the challenge with the industry today is there are only so many data science experts. There's only so many people that really understand the modeling part and the algorithm building part of it. But there's lots of use cases. There's we could point around the room and find use cases. Yep. And so I think it's a question of how do you take the hard part and make it easier for people to go implement and repeat. Yep. And so I think it's a great example. So this was just recently launched. Where's some early success you guys are seeing, or what are some of the use cases that you're seeing the most traction?
So we, there's a lot of in the AI space. So we have 4 pillars that we've defined. One is visual understanding, which entails, as I was talking about, applying computer vision straight on the screen. So we are seeing a lot of uptake on that also because the robots used to break all the time, and in virtual desktop environments, it was really, really hard to do automation, things like Citrix environments. So we are easing that pain of the users, and we are seeing a lot of excitement there. The second pillar is what we call document understanding. So doing things like invoices and receipts, parsing them automatically, doing things, scenarios like account receivables. Those are big problems in enterprises. And so we use AI Fabric to manage all those models. So we released an invoice and receipt extractor about a week ago. But under the hood, it actually uses AI Fabric to maintain all those models. And now you can easily have a receipt and invoice extractor, which is out of the box. But if, for example, you have specific invoices coming from, let's say, specific geos, or have data points that are very specific to your organization, you can actually customize that model, and that will be managed as a part of the AI Fabric.
That's great. And I think that's a really good example of, we talked about this earlier, but just mixing in together these different modes of AI, of language, visual, voice. So it's also exciting to see those things once again continuing to converge.
Yeah, even in this invoice and receipt use case, we've combined those two things. So we look at the visual representation of the documents, but we then also apply NLP and traditional OCR on top of it, combining all those things. Typically in the IoT world, you would hear a word called sensor fusion. Essentially, we are applying sensor fusion across the board in all these areas that we're working on.
Yeah, that's great. And it is cool, and it's also interesting. I love kind of cross interdisciplinary activities. You think about how a factory works versus how an IoT system would work versus how an AI RPA system would work, and there's all these great kind of best practices we can share across these different disciplines. So we're here at this event for 2 days. What are you really excited about? What's maybe 1 or 2 topics that you're most excited hearing about or learning about while you're here at VentureBeat Transform?
There's a couple of things. So we work closely with Google on a lot of this stuff. Like AI Fabric, we announced at Google Next, but the underlying infrastructure is all built on top of Google. We work with Microsoft's AI groups closely. I was in Microsoft research, so we still have deep relationships going in there. But things like reinforcement learning, things like active learning would be super important because we have a good roadmap and we are on the path to execute it well over the next 6 months to a year. But as we start looking at scaled use cases, as we start looking at use cases where these robots need to be made much more intelligent than what they are right now, where they can automatically just learn from humans instead of, we have a low code environment right now, but imagine if there was a way to make it completely codeless. And so you have an RPA system that you install, you show it how to do things, it automatically generates a robot for you. So that's the ideal utopian scenario for us. So just hearing all the stuff that is going on in the different companies, it's been refreshing to see, the latest advancements in research.
Yeah, agreed. I think, and to your point, both at the academic level, but also at the very large, tech leadership level, and then how that then waterfalls into specific applications. So I think there's a lot of innovation at a number of different levels, which is exciting to see.
Yep.
And so the last thing I always get kicked out of is the hype of AI, and people get buzzword bingo and examples of where people get super excited or either super scared about the technology. So I guess for you, is there a buzzword that you get a kick out of hearing, or a buzzword that you feel like maybe is misappropriated or misused?
There's a lot of hype about these self-learning systems and how robots are going to take over the world, and there will be these human-killing android robots that are going to become much more intelligent than us. And I always get a kick out of, there was an incident at one of my previous employers, specifically Microsoft. And where we were showing a bunch of things. So I was working in Microsoft Research, one of premier computer science research places. And then over there, people were talking about this stuff. Oh, we should start talking about the ethical AI and what are we going to do about things when they go rogue. And, we showed them the state-of-the-art system, which was a policy network that we had generated, was doing reinforcement learning, but also had elements of unsupervised and supervised learning in it. And the thing was so brittle that you inject a single amount of wrong data in it, and it was taking like 3 million features in it. One single feature would break the whole thing. I was like, if you really think this thing is going to become sentient at some point, I don't think that's happening. So, but it doesn't mean that we need to, or we should be ignoring all the ethical pieces of it where we apply these technologies, because these can be super powerful.
Yeah, agreed. And it's that balance. I think it's, once again, not getting overly caught up in the fear, but at the same time being thoughtful, because it does have big implications of things like, voice and voice speakers. And so there are places where it's like, hey, things run faster than we think they're going to. But I agree, from like the sentient being coming and taking over, I don't think we have to worry about that anytime soon. Well, great. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for the time, and looking forward to continuing that throughout the next couple of days here.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of the event. We'll be live streaming a lot of other interviews like this. I'll be interviewing a number of other folks, and look forward for more information through the VentureBeat website. Thank you.